On the surface, this seems kind of simple, and Caleb and I were discussing this, and maybe it's not so simple. So today's tough question, as stated quite simply, is Georgia, Florida, or Alabama Tennessee's most important game this year? Today's tough question. We'll have that up on the Twitter feed, and it's brought to you by Zen Sports. Zen Sports, I'm telling you, the new sports book in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares on Zen Sports. What you see is what you get with their cash rewards program. You get a lot of cash for a welcome bonus, earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you use the code HOOKED, HOOKED. That's right, unlimited 5% cash back. Keep betting, keep earning with up to 3% cash back on your betting volume every month after that. And refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Zen Sports is bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Again, Zen Sports betting just got better. Use the promo code HOOKED. Today's tough question: Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee's most important game this year. Caleb, I'm very fair on this program. I will allow you to go first so that I can tell you how wrong you are. How are you this morning?
I'm great. How are you doing, Dave?
Well, that's kind of a loaded way of answering the question.
I'm going to say this. If you say anybody but Georgia, you're probably somebody who still thinks Bill Russell's the greatest player in the history of the NBA.
Not greatest, but better than Wilt Chamberlain. Anyway.
No, he wasn't.
Okay,
he was a role player.
Florida, Georgia, when you have 6 Hall of Famers on a team, it's probably a pretty good team. I mean, yeah, they had like 8. But anyway, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee's most important game this year. What is Tennessee's most important game this year?
It's Georgia. It's obviously Georgia because Tennessee, last year I would have said Florida. This year it's Georgia because Tennessee is now at the level where they expect to compete for championships. They're not waiting to do that. They're there. And you know what you do when you're there? You circle the game that's going to define whether or not you win a championship. And that game is Georgia. If they lose to Florida, we will reassess. But they shouldn't, and they'd almost better not lose to Florida. Florida at this point is what South Carolina was for Tennessee in the 90s. Okay, and it should be. It should be that. If it's not, then Tennessee has a lot of other issues, but they are borderline. They should circle Florida as a win this year. Alabama is not a divisional game, so it doesn't really matter if they were to lose that game. It all comes down to Georgia. And if it doesn't come down to Georgia, Tennessee will have regressed under Josh Heupel to a level that they shouldn't have. Georgia is the biggest game this year, and it might be, as I talked about yesterday, the biggest home November game in Tennessee football history.
So we are still doing divisions this year, last I heard, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that all gets messed up next year, and we don't know how we're going to fix that. But we are still doing divisions, and I'm going to tell you why it's Florida. It is Florida because it's early in the season. It is Florida because Joe Milton will be on the road. It is Florida because if you lose that game, it looks like you were a flash in the pan last year, got lucky on a down year with Alabama, got lucky on a down year with Florida. That's the way some people are going to spin it. You probably would take yourself out of any sort of East run. You would hurt yourself in the college football playoff because people are going to drop you down further. And if you lose another game, you're not going to make the college football playoff. So those are all high goals. You said a word that players and coaches don't use often. You expect to beat Florida. They might expect to beat Florida, but they're not going to say that. That's still a football program with talent that's going to be at home with a raucous crowd. If Tennessee loses that game, you said something else. We reassess. We do. We wonder if they can go to Alabama and hang tight. We wonder if they can keep it close against Georgia. It changes the entire tone of the season. It's first, it's not nostalgia that I'm referring to because I was around the great Florida games of the 90s and early 2000s. But it is Florida, especially with a new quarterback. If this were Hendon Hooker returning, I wouldn't say Florida. But it is absolutely imperative that Joe Milton goes to Florida. If Tennessee's going to be successful this year, he not only gets the win, but plays well and efficiently. No turnovers, very few overthrows. It is Florida, and it's not close. I will give you Georgia second. Alabama, since we're still in division play, in my mind, is a distant third, but it is Florida.
Dave is totally stuck in the 90s, guys. He's got a poster of Michael Jordan in his room. He's probably trying to remind us about the Cowboys' last Super Bowl. Okay.
I can't, by the way.
You what?
I can, by the way, and you made a reference to Deion Sanders that I didn't get into. But anyway, the Cowboys were down 21-0 in that game and threw the ball a lot, and that's why Michael Irvin got 192 receiving yards. But anyway, I'm not stuck in the 90s. If Tennessee stubs their toe against Florida, then they're just another one of those programs that's in the middle of the SEC trying to get to the Georgia-Alabama level. This is a game that you would not question this, I don't think, that Georgia or Alabama, if they had to go to Florida in September, they would go win that game, right?
Yes, they would dominate that game.
If Tennessee is going to be of that ilk, they had better win that game or it changes the way they're viewed nationally.
Well, but couldn't you say the same thing about South Carolina, Texas A&M, heck, even Kentucky and Missouri on the road? You could say it about all of those teams, just like you could about Florida.
I could, but Florida with the raucous crowd, I think, is scary. I think anybody that's been to a game there realizes that that's way, way different. And I love Williams-Brice. Don't get me wrong. I think it's very underrated. I think there are a lot of underrated home venues. But going to Florida and the noise could be a huge factor. It was a factor in the Georgia game last year. So maybe I overestimate the road crowd, but I don't think I do. I've seen many a teams wilt in that heat, especially in September. And while I think Tennessee will be a solid favorite, 5-6 points, you tell me you're better with gambling, brought to you by Zen Sports, than I am. I think it'll be 5 or 6 points. If Tennessee goes down there and slips up, it wouldn't stun me and wouldn't even surprise me because I think that's a tough road game. And I think that I'm not a Billy Napier guy. Oh, he's details. And he might get them to a respectable level at some point. But I think year 2, he's going to have a better grasp of that program. And he's not just throwing Anthony Richardson out there in September hoping that he makes a play. I think he's going to have his offense, his defense a little bit better instilled. I think they're facing a tough matchup down there. By the way, D said Virginia. If you lose to Virginia, sure. But we're assuming that they beat Virginia. And we ask about the SEC main opponents, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. So it's Florida. Are you convinced?
Still not convinced because I think Florida should be a circled win. I actually would give you this. The Swamp is brutal. And Tennessee fans don't want to hear this. The Swamp's the loudest place in the SEC. It's actually even louder to me than Death Valley because Death Valley is only loud at night. The Swamp is loud. It doesn't matter if you play a noon game, a 3:30 game, or 8 p.m. game. The Swamp is always raucous and loud. And it's those fans are brutal. They really are. And so I can actually get with you on that. And you're right. The September heat can mess with people. I'll never forget Phil Fulmer. It was one of the games Tennessee won in the Swamp. It was the Hail Mary Casey Clausen to James Banks game. Remember how sweaty Fulmer was on the side?
Yeah, there was an ongoing joke that he had to change shirts because he had the booby sweat. I've been incredibly overweight. I know what the booby sweat is. You need another shirt around or something. So I think he changed shirts at halftime. It was hot. It's hot and darn it. I mean, that place is miserable as a rider. I can't imagine as a player. So, no, I think Florida's the most important game. Do you agree that Alabama's third?
Alabama's a distant third. Look, South Carolina and Kentucky might be more important than Alabama this year.